LetFreedomRing2014.com, the radio show, paid for by Jim Condit Jr. for Congress, 2014.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Jim Condit Jr. for Congress, 2014. This is Jim Condit Jr. Let me explain a little bit of what happens here, is what is happening. There's this thing called the Reasonable Access Law, which basically forces the FCC-licensed radio stations to carry the programming of congressional candidates or senatorial or presidential candidates, federal candidates, on the air. If they sell time to businesses, then they have to sell time in a fair manner, in a reasonable manner, to candidates, especially the last 2 months of the election. So that's how I get this program on here at all, because what you're going to hear in the next hour, you should probably, if you're interested in politics, you should probably call your friends and tell them to turn on 55 KRC. Will be probably some of the most shocking stuff that you've ever heard on the radio politically. One of my friends in Florida urged me to do this, and I believe in doing it, and that is to say that while we're going to be critical of certain organizations in a way that probably many of you have never heard on major AM talk radio, because we're here for those listening on the internet around the world. We're worldwide on the internet. This is the station in Cincinnati that carries Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Mark Levin, Dave Ramsey, and so forth. But he urged me to say this, and I feel this, that I love all people. I love the Palestinian people, the Jewish people, the American people, the black people, the white people. And what I'm doing running politically, and I'm running against John Boehner in the 8th District of Ohio, is to try to get the truth out, what I think is critical truth for the American people to hear. So many of you may remember the play or the movie with Tinkerbell, when at one point the Tinkerbell's light was going out, and they said you had to praise her, people had to yell out that they loved her, the children did, or something, so her light wouldn't go out. Well, whether you realize it or not, this show, this 1 hour, and there'll be 1 hour next week at 10 p.m., this show is the Tinkerbell light of the liberty forces in America. We will tell you what the problem is and what the solution is on this show. And you can go to my website, LetFreedomRing2014.com, in the documentation section to study more in depth or to get documentation. We also have an video audio link. If you go to the website in the left-hand column, there's a video audio link, and then there's also a documentation section. But in the other 365 days a year, and the 22 hours, not counting this week and next week, of my show, you're not going to hear this directly. You're not going to hear. You've now broken through all the gatekeepers, and you're going to hear things directly that will never be put together anywhere else. Even the good organizations that I recognize, such as the Right to Life, National Rifle Association, Campaign for Liberty of Ron Paul, do not tell the people clearly what they need to do. The Tea Party people are doing some of what I'm going to say, but they don't have the right mental background to fight the forces that they're really trying to fight to save America. So now we have a Facebook event going. I think we might hear from one of the people in Arizona who's coordinating that, and she'll be on at least by 20 to 11. At least that's our plan, to read some questions from Facebook. So the problem and the solution. Let's talk about the problem that you're just not going to hear on any of these of any of the FCC licensed stations. There's two things that you need to know, the American people need to know, or they're like children, not really understanding what's happening on. The first political fact of our time is who runs the media. And 100% of the big media, not 5%, not 95%, not 99%, 100% of the big media is run by the organized Jewish lobby. We're not talking about every Jewish person, obviously. It's just like if somebody says Islamo fascist, they're not talking about every person in Islam. So it would be, even though you're accused of this, and if you discuss this subject, you're immediately accused of anti-Semitism, that is the fact that the American media, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox, AP Wire, all the big city daily newspapers like the Cincinnati Enquirer and the New York Times and the LA Times, and Clear Channel Radio and all the other stations, which are big talk stations, are 100% run by the organized Jewish lobby, such as AIPAC, such as ADL, such as the powers we've heard of and not heard of behind and working with them. That's why James Traficant, the former congressman who I had on this exact show in May, right before the primary, he was barred from all of that media for the last 5 years of his life because he told who was controlling the media and who was controlling Congress. Now, I have the call, and let me see if I can take this call. I hope I know what I'm doing here. If I cut you off, Nikki, call back in. Just 1 second. Hello? Are you there, Nikki?
Yes.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
This is Nikki Nelson, everybody from Arizona, who's a Facebook whiz and powerhouse. And so tell everybody what we're doing tonight and tell them how to go join the Facebook fund that you got going. And then we'll have you back in about 40 minutes to ask maybe a few questions that come over Facebook while people are listening to the show around the world.
Okay, great. PalestineNews.com has been nice enough to let us use their page, and you go to www.facebook.com, Palestine fans, both plural, and you can ask your questions there, and I guess I'll get back with you then, Jim.
Okay, now hold on. Let's spell that where you want them to go to join the Facebook event. Just
www.facebook.com/Palestine, Palestines, fans, FANS.
And that's all one word.
It is.
Okay, and so if you still didn't get that, you can go to letfreedomring2014.com, and right at the top of the page, I linked to that page. So thanks a lot for setting this up. We have people from Switzerland and California, and I know they're all over the world if they wish, and if the word is spreading, people can listen in and then talk to each other. And so this new Facebook technology, those people like me who are now getting into their late 50s and 60s don't totally understand it, but I'm glad you could set it up for us, Nikki. And we'll talk.
No problem. Anything for you, Jim.
Okay.
And we've got several questions, so it's great.
Oh, boy. Okay, listen, I will talk to you in about 40 minutes. We're going to play that Celine Dion, God Bless America, about 10:40, and then you'll be back in, okay?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, so the second thing beside who runs the media, see, because American people think like the media is, most of the people still think it's like a referee that you can trust, or like you can trust Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck that are actually, you might like it or you might not like it. They are 100% mouthpieces for the organized Jewish lobby. That's who pays their check. If they were talking like me, even to this point, they would lose their job within a few weeks, if not within a few hours. They better not have any skeletons in their closet. Any of the subjects I'm going to touch in this hour would get them fired if they talk like I'm going to talk about them. So that's number one. The second thing people have to understand, if they want to understand what's going on in the United States, is that 9/11, 2001, the terror attacks of 9/11, 2001, who did them and why? And the answer to that question is the same organized Jewish shadow government. It's better to call it a shadow government. Again, we're not implicating all Jewish people. I wish I could say it was a German shadow government or an Islamo-Arab shadow government, because then the American people would stand up and cheer. But when you touch anything on these realities, then immediately you're called insane, a hater, blah, 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 blah. But if people will follow this information down, and I have to, I'm not going to get on GQ for the best dresser in the United States or anything like that, and I don't have many talents, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to assert this, and you can decide for yourself. I am the best reporter, or one of the best in the United States, to bring the American people the truth through my websites and through the few shows like this or radio ads that we can run. And who did 9/11, again, is the same organized Jewish power structure. And that is a big statement for a lot of people. But you go to my website, letfreedomring2014.com, okay? And you go into the video and audio section, and under 9/11, you'll find two audios that I did, two speeches I did in Washington, D.C. for the Rebuilding Christendom Conference, were for two one-hour speeches I went into all the Israeli connections to 9/11, and of course they're agents here that are running so much of our federal government. So now, what's the purpose of 9/11? The purpose of 9/11 is twofold, and Lawrence Eagleburger, Henry Kissinger's top assistant, said this on, I believe it was CNN, could have been MSNBC or Fox. I got it on tape somewhere on those old VHS tapes. Lawrence Eagleburger said 10 minutes after the second building fell, and I believe it was on CNN, he said, the American people are going to have to get used to two things. We're going to be at war in the Middle East for 50 years. We've already been there for 11. And two, Americans are going to have to learn to give up some of their freedoms for security. So the power structure has used 9/11 to send our soldiers to war in the Middle East. And Trafficant said on Jim Trafficant, who unfortunately has passed away since on a tragic reported tractor accident a few weeks ago on September 27th. Is the day he died. He said on Greta Van Susteren in 2005, and this is one of the reasons he was knocked off. He's been censored from the media for the last 5 years of his life. He said the United States is conducting Israel's expansionist policy, and everybody's afraid to say it. You can see that on YouTube. There's over 565,000 hits, I believe. Greta Van Susteren, James Trafficant, and then hit part 1, and you'll see him say all the things that got him banned from the air. So that's what's going on in America, and all this ISIS and all this stuff. We'll get into some of this stuff. This is all part of the plan. Think of it as if Hollywood scriptwriters are writing a TV movie for you, except it's not a TV movie, it's the news. So every few days we got some crisis that tells us, oh, we got real problems. I mean, if you listen to the TV media, you're going to be thinking that half of Macaulay High School and half of Seton High School is missing, that all these girls have gone over to the Middle East to join ISIS or Al-Qaeda. That's some of the news. Now, I don't say they can't find a distraught girl here and there who does that, but this is a bunch of baloney in general. The idea that we have homegrown terrorists, in Kenwood and White Oak and Cincinnati and all the neighborhoods across the country, that is just to justify the terror attacks that the background government and those associated with the Mossad and the dark side of Mossad is Israel, CIA, and the dark side of the CIA will do these attacks, and then they will blame them on homegrown terrorists. So if you want to get smart, you got to start looking at things from this angle. Let's go into, I'll tell you what we'll do, Mr. Producer. If you're able to play cut 1, which is Mary Fall, we break up this brain surgery without anesthesia, with some songs, or at least parts of songs. And this is Mary Fall singing Going Home from Gods and Generals, which was let's play that. Thanks. Okay, so we're back, and Jim Condit Jr. again, Jim Condit Jr. for Congress, running against John Boehner. I'm on the Constitution Party line. Everything I'm saying is not endorsed by everybody in the Constitution Party, or maybe anybody, but if you can't remember my name, just vote for Constitution Party and send those fellows in Washington, Boehner and all the rest of them, a message that we want people to start standing up for us like Jim Trafficant did when he was in Congress and he was alive, and Ron Paul and so forth. So at any rate, 9/11 was a false flag done by the background organized Jewish lobby, shadow government, and blamed on the Arabs. And that may be a shocking statement to a lot of people. I won't have, but it's in our documentation section, in our video and audio section. I may get a chance to do it. So why am I bringing that up in this campaign? If you've been listening to talk radio and Fox News and MSNBC and CNN, they're saying, hey, we got ISIS, this thing we never heard of 6 months ago, but now is like one of the most powerful things in the world. ISIS might come across the border and bring in a nuclear bomb. A lot of you have heard that. They're saying that. So they're getting ready sooner or later for another false flag. Dick Cheney came on to Sean Hannity and said the next 9/11 will make the last 9/11 look like a picnic. So I'm trying to prevent the next 9/11. When somebody from the Mossad or a related Israeli intelligence brings over a nuclear bomb and sets it off and tries to blame it on some Arab. I want people, if the next false 9/11 happens, if you'll research who did the first 9/11, to immediately think organized Jewish lobby. We don't need to be arresting all these, get some Arab people from here and there, in the United States and arrest them for show, then let them go. That happened a lot after 9/11. We need to be arresting the Jewish operatives in the federal government, who they're the ones that are committing treason in America. And so much of our country is being brought down because the American people will not stand up against this one faction that nobody's allowed to talk about it. Now, in our radio ad we've prepared on the Palestine issue, we had Dr. Norman Finkelstein, who's a courageous Jewish leader who's speaking out against the persecution of the Palestinians. I worked with Jim and Ken Collier, who are both liberal Jewish guys. We worked on vote fraud. They both passed away, unfortunately, in the 90s. Howard Phillips, the founder of the Constitution Party, I coordinated the signature campaign to get him on the ballot from 1996 and 2000. He was of Jewish descent. He had converted to some branch of Christianity, but I'm the only guy in the history of Ohio that twice organized a signature campaign to get a man of Jewish descent on the ballot. So doesn't really hold up that I'm anti-Semitic. There's always some Jewish folks who are fighting their dominant leadership, and Norman Finkelstein, the professor, is one of those. And that's the other commercial we prepared for this campaign was on the persecution of the Palestinians, which was hot about 5 weeks ago. And the government of Israel, Netanyahu and so forth, always make sure that everything fails. They claim that it's, and maybe in many cases, it may be the Palestinians, Hamas or whoever. So all these groups had strange funding when they started, but they may claim that it's somebody throwing in bottle rockets from the other side, and maybe it is. But if the Arabs don't throw in the bottle rockets, then Israel will do it to themselves. They are the king of false flag operations. And Mike Piper's new book, False Flags, if you want to look at it, he goes into a lot of the false flags that have been done in the last 50, 60 years. And the government of Israel is one of the kings, if not the king, of false flag operations, where they do something themselves, blame it on somebody else. And in this case, they had the excuse to go in and with real planes and real bombs and kill 3,000 real Palestinian men, women, children who were sitting there like a fish in a barrel with no defense. Sean Hannity, I know, he'd say, well, what country would put up with 3,000 bottle rockets being shot in without defending yourself? Okay, fair enough. What country would put up with another country controlling their water, their electricity, and even the food that comes in and out of Palestine? That's that of the Palestinian people. The occupied territories, as even the Jewish papers call it in Israel. Who would put up with that? So the Palestinian people just want to be free. That's why Pat Buchanan, a lot of other people have talked about a two-state solution. But right now it's just a slow genocide that is happening that is happening worldwide with the United States backing Israel, and it's been a slow genocide against the Palestinian people since 1948. Okay, so let's, I want to try to get through the things that I promised on the one radio ad to cover in this show. So let's go on to, several things I don't want to forget to mention. How should people react to my campaign? Well, everybody listening, plus everybody in Cincinnati, plus everybody in the country should send $10 so I can fight what we're fighting, $1 trillion propaganda machine. But that doesn't happen usually. We have a few supporters, but that usually doesn't happen. Most people are too confused by their brainwashing they've been subjected to by the mass media. They don't even know what to think when they hear someone like me. And a lot of people just suppress it. If they feel like they should look into this, they suppress it because it's too inconvenient. But that's what should happen. Pray, spread the word, and fund people like me that are telling the truth. And people can do that by going to LetFreedomRing2014.com and make a donation right underneath the video. Now, another subject I promised to cover is Ebola, autism, and vaccines. Another thing we got being run out by like a TV movie is this Ebola thing. Well, first of all, I want to call on the public airwaves, Thomas Frieden, I think his name is, F-R-I-E-D-E-N or F-R-E-I-D-A-N. I should have looked it up, I guess. The head of the CDC, the so-called Center for Disease Control. I want to call him and all the people working with him that are in authority. And the CDC, liars. They are liars. They are hiding from the American people, and they attack anybody who brings it up. That autism is being brought to the American people by vaccines in large part. And there's plenty of websites on this. There's plenty of doctors who are exposing this. Deidre Imus, the wife of Don Imus, has brought this up. Jenny McCarthy, when she was on The View, went in, at least with that view. And many doctors. And so we have 1 out of 150 people, 150 babies in the United States are contracting autism. Somebody told me it was 1 out of 16 or some incredible number, but let's go with 101 out of 150. That, when I was a little kid, you never even heard of autism, and you rarely ran in the 60s. We were saying we knew two kids who were not autistic, but one was mongoloid, one was a little bit retarded, as they used to say, just lower intelligence. But now, everywhere you look, there's these autism, and those are being caused by the vaccines in large part. We could do a whole big show on that. And the Ebola movie they're rolling out for us doesn't make any sense. On the one hand, they say, we're going to take a break here in a minute for the bottom of the hour station identification in about a minute and 20 seconds here. But, they say, one thing they've been saying over and over again, don't worry, Ebola's hard to catch. It's not airborne. Then in the next paragraph, they'll say, well, it's body fluids. So it was Deidre Imus, Don Imus's wife, on Neil Cavuto in the last week or two that said, well, wait a minute. If it's body fluids, and if somebody sneezes around you with Ebola, can't you breathe in those micro droplets and get Ebola from the body fluids of the person that sneezed? And Neil Cavuto said, good point. And it's an excellent point. So that is one of the more glaring things they keep saying. Not hard to catch, pass by body fluids, not airborne. Well, sneeze is airborne. That's one of many, many, many total contradictions. We had this doctor come back from Africa. I don't know what this is all about. He's a doctor. He feels fatigued in New York City, but then he goes bowling. He then goes to a nice restaurant, gets on the subway, drives in a taxi. And the CDC says, don't worry, the taxi man is at risk, and nobody who rides in that taxi is at risk. Well, what if he sneezed? Then they'll say in the next paragraph, dried Ebola can last for 48 hours. So we got all these. I'm surprised they didn't say that he left the rich restaurant and went and spit in the city's water supply. I mean, what more can the guy do who's supposed to be a doctor? So some kind of a TV movie is being rolled out for us. Okay, so I guess we're going to be, we're very close to the bottom of the hour here, and I guess we're going to take a station break from the station, then my station break, then we'll be back and we'll try to continue covering these subjects. Let Freedom Ring, 2014.com for more documentation.
This is Fox News on 55 KRC, the talk station.
Safeguard against Ebola. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says a quarantine will stay in place for
a healthcare professional who returns to this region who had exposure to infected people, or citizens who are returning or coming to the U.S. who had exposure to infected people will be asked to remain in their homes for a 21-day quarantine period.
Those quarantined will be compensated for lost income.
I think that it's more than likely that he's giving this a serious thought.
On ABC's This Week, George P. Bush, who is running for Texas Land Commissioner, says his father, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, may run for president. And Cardinals outfielder Oscar Taveras killed in a car crash in the Dominican Republic. He was just 22. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Okay, so then continuing with Ebola for just a second more, now they're saying, well, hey, wait a minute, we got an Ebola vaccine coming out. I wouldn't take that vaccine if would not want to, even if they held me down. That vaccine is very quizzical in itself. On Fox News, Greta Van Susteren asked 3 doctors, well, could you get Ebola from that vaccine? You know, like you get the flu from the flu vaccine. All 3 of them said no. What? This is the first thing where you're vaccinating. Don't you have to vaccinate them with the Ebola virus or whatever to make it the antibodies? And I want to say this on this subject, and then I'm going to have to leave it to keep going. Many people may not know that the Rothschilds sent over a guy named Fishbein, I believe his name was, to start the American Medical Association in 1903. And they, of course, basically run the medical establishment in many ways. And there's a document called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which people say, well, that's a forgery. I would certainly say it's at least a Rothschild banker document. It's not as some people have accused, the document of the Jewish people, which would be impossible anyway for a whole people to do anything. But this is a Rothschild document. Here's what it said in Protocol 10. And Henry Ford said, even if it's a forgery in 1920, it's what's happening in the world, has been, and what is happening in the world now. But here's what it says in Protocol 10. Paragraph 19 says, basically, it says that, it says, they need to bring hatred, struggle, dissension, even by the use of torture. This is to the nations, by starvation, by the inoculation of diseases. That was first translated into English in 1905, when it was discovered a little bit before then in Russia. By one, so that the goyim, that's what the protocols refer to as non-Jews, as goyim or human cattle, see no other issue than to take refuge in our complete sovereignty and in money and in all else. So there is in the protocols talks 112 years ago about inoculating people with disease. Okay. Now, I'm going to keep going here. There's something I don't want to forget to mention, though, and that is that Clear Channel, iHeartRadio, KRC, WKRC has done a very illegal thing in this campaign. There's a candidate in Northern Kentucky, a write-in named he's running against Mitch McConnell and Tammy Grimes, and he's a write-in candidate because he's a white nationalist, which of course is a fringe thing that most people would think is on the fringe. Even though I've been in touch with this campaign because I'm interested, because this reasonable access law is the way I reach the public. He sent hundreds of dollars to WKRC to buy time like I'm buying on Sunday, and they basically returned his money and said, "No, you're not a real candidate," and they were backed by the Federal Communications Commission. So this is a very illegal thing that has been done to Robert, and I'm interested in that. We're going to be following it because that could be used as a precedent to deny other candidates the ability to buy time through the reasonable access law. So, let's see. I did not want to forget to mention that on this campaign, on this show. Okay, so let's move on to some of the other subjects I'd promised I'd talk about. I said we'd talk about blood pH. That your blood pH is the key to your health. So if you suddenly got diagnosed with cancer, if you are feeling bad all the time, if you're way overweight, if you're a little bit overweight, if your kids are overweight, you need to look into how to get your blood pH back to normal, which is like 7.35. This is like a public service because I see so many obese children and so many adults that are struggling with obesity because of all the good food that we have in America, and some of it's GMO'd and all that kind of thing. Then I want to mention this. So what you want to do, even if you've been diagnosed with cancer, go to our website under documentation and look where you can go for help. There's a book called The pH Miracle by Dr. Robert O. Young. It's a book. First 40 pages tell you all about this. You can go to Dr. Richard Schultz's site, which is herbdoc.com. You can call the Gerson Institute, Gerson. All this is at our documentation section on www.letfreedomring2014.com. Now, by the way, the candidate's name who has been wronged by not the WKRC not allowing him to buy airtime, I only said his first name. It's Robert Ransdell, and he's running against the Mitch McConnell and Tammy Grimes, and he's taken some very controversial positions. He's had some signs that would be offensive to many people, but again, First Amendment. There's communists that have run for office. There's socialists that have bought time, like Barry Commoner in 1988. So this is a First Amendment issue, and for them to refuse him to buy time and say he's not a real candidate when he's a write-in, they claim that Murkowski lady won for Senate back in 2012 as a write-in for U.S. Senate. So we can't say write-in candidates are frivolous. And there's been other write-in victories in Congress in 2006, governor in South Carolina, Strom Thurmond in 1968, I believe. So to prevent this candidate, Robert Ransdell, from buying time is a very dangerous precedent, and I'm interested in it. And it's not the people that deal with us that we buy time from. The folks that we deal with face-to-face at Clear Channel have always been A1 excellent. It's somebody up in the top, the lawyers down at San Antonio and those running the whole network that are trying to figure out how to get rid of this reasonable access law. So even people like me can't even come on for an hour once or twice a year and talk like this. Okay, well, we have a few other subjects to cover, but what I'm going to do now, Mr. Producer, is Brad, if you could play the Celine Dion song, and let me make a little bit of a intro. This is God Bless America, sung by Celine Dion, And you have John Kennedy. We have him talking in a little clip in it. We have Pat Buchanan when he won the New Hampshire primary in 1996, which was the high point of my political life when that was a hand-counted state. And he said, they're going to come after this campaign with everything we got. Don't wait for orders from headquarters. Mount up everybody and ride to the sounds of the guns. And then finally we end with William Wallace and Braveheart, with the greatest short freedom speech of all time. So maybe we could roll that now. Okay, Nikki Nelson of Arizona, are you there?
I am here. That was beautiful.
Well, thank you. We're real happy with that. By the way, the reason we can play all that copyrighted stuff on the air is because BMIRSCAP monitors all these stations, and the fee I pay for the show, they pay part of it to them if we use a song like that. So go ahead, Nikki. What's going on Facebook? We got a few minutes here, but I got to also keep covering these subjects because time is flying. We'll have another show next week at 10 p.m. Eastern at WKRC here, 55krc.com on the worldwide internet. And so we'll do it. We'll continue the fun next week from 10 to 11. But what's going on Facebook?
I'm overwhelmed with questions, and I'm going to try to pick, maybe the most important. Not that they're not all important.
Yeah.
The best ones.
Okay.
And I've got one from Anna Lee. Mm-hmm. And she wants to know why there's not a proper investigation of 9/11. We all know it wasn't the Muslims; it was a Zionist attack. Yeah, and they killed all of our citizens, and now they're killing everybody in our name on behalf of Israel. What can we do about it?
Yeah, well, I'm going to say what we can do by getting all in the precinct system and displacing all the Republican and Democratic county and state and national leaders. That's what we need to do it peacefully and constitutionally. But the reason there's not an investigation is because of what Jim Traficant said on Greta Van Susteren in 2009, that the organized Jewish lobby controls the Congress. They control much of, I would say, all of the major media, all the major city newspapers. They control the federal government. Obama's chief of staff was Rahm Emanuel, a top Jewish operative who at least he put on the uniform for his country. Oh, wait a minute. He didn't put on the uniform for the United States because he's also a citizen of Israel. He put on the uniform of Israel during one of those wars back in 2002. That was Obama's first chief of staff. The idea that Obama is like a Muslim front is ridiculous, even though Obama may be dragging his feet in a few things. I don't know, because they seem to have some, but that's the reason. And this is what happened in all the Middle Ages. The Jewish people, everyday people, have suffered because their leaders, who'd grasp control of things, would get so powerful in a country, the country would rise up. That's why the Jewish people were kicked out of 100 times out of different countries in the last 1,000 years, sometimes more than once from the same country. We're seeing in real time with the absurd persecution, especially regarding our money, and how everybody's in debt from birth. People are starting to look and say, what's going on here? We live in the richest age of all time, and everybody's in debt, and they tell the kids they'll be in debt for the next $60 trillion for the next. So this is what's happening. The stranglehold is there. It's really unfortunate Traficant died because we were trying to build a national leadership around him, and he had the charisma and the voice and the leadership to do it. But that's what the reason is. They are able, this one organized Jewish network is able to frustrate any type of investigation. Each of these subjects I could do an hour or two on, and so could you and half the people listening. But we got to move on. What's another question?
We've got another question from Roger Pack out of Ohio. He said he's very concerned with the one-party system, and all of the election options are bad or worse. Both the parties are AIPAC employees and controlled by the Rothschild banking cartel. Seriously, what the heck can simple citizens do to fight against the beast? Well,
I'll just give the answer that I was going to cover because times are moving on here anyway. That is correct. All of the local Democrat and Republican Party county chairmen who pick the candidates, endorse the candidates who usually win, who have the voting machines, they're counting our votes in secret on secret computer programs. The Secretary of State of Ohio has not only admitted that in public. I got to put this up on YouTube. It was at a Tea Party meeting. John Husted, he said that they also signed contracts with 4 companies that count 96% of the American vote, like Diebold was one of them. They signed contracts that they're not allowed to look at their software, Nikki. So all of our.
I know. I saw the gentleman who gave the testimony. What was his name?
I can't remember right now, but all of the secret counts on these computers are run out of New York City. The 5 TV networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and Fox, own the company that announces the result and works with these 4 companies for the secret count. So what needs to be done, and this is what Robert, I think, is asking about in Ohio. And
Roger.
Oh, Roger, I'm sorry. What Roger in Ohio is asking about, we need every person who's concerned about liberty, every person of every good organization, even the Occupy Wall Street people who I would disagree with on many things, they need to go into the Democratic Party. You run for precinct. In Ohio, it takes 5 signatures to run for precinct. Every one of us should be running for precinct. That's the little area in your neighborhood, and it's like a little country, geographic area, and you and all your neighbors vote at the same place. That's a precinct. There's, 300,000 of them in the country, but whoever wins the most precinct positions in a party, like let's say the Republican Party of Hamilton County here in Cincinnati, you meet at a meeting a month later, which nobody knows about in the public, at like convention center, and you elect the party leaders. Same thing happens in the Democratic Party. I love the third parties, but the Democrats and Republicans run the whole country, and the vote is fixed through the secret computer count. Another 3-hour show we don't have time to do here. But you can get this documentation at the audio and video and the documentation section of Let Freedom Ring 2014 to come. So we get in there, we become precinct executives. 1/3 of them are vacant in both the Democrat and Republican Party. If you run, vote for yourself, you win. You change the party leaders at the local level. They can change the party leaders a few months later at the state level. They can change the party leaders at the national level. We then go back to honest, open voting where we count the ballots, throw the secret diabolical computers out. I mean, computers, I love computers, but not for counting votes, Nikki. And then we can endorse good candidates, take back the Congress, and fix the country and fix the money system, fire the Fed like Traficant was saying, end the IRS, have freedom in the greatest age of plenty that we've ever lived in history of mankind, yet everybody's doesn't have enough cash in their pocket. So that's the answer, and that is there's videos and explanations on the website in the documentation session. So that's the answer I wanted to tell everybody in the natural order of what can be done. And if you don't understand it, just go in and, that's why I should have, again, I'm not a natural leader of men like Traficant or John Kennedy or Mel Gibson or something like that who could stand up and come in a room and everybody, recognizes they're a leader of men. But I'm the only one saying this in public. I should have thousands of people who can afford it. If you can't afford it, I understand because the way they're running the money system. But thousands of people could afford $10 a month, and we could get this thing out, run candidates all across the country, and we could have a chance to turn this thing around. But not just going to meetings and holding up signs and writing Romney and Obama, who are both agents of Goldman Sachs, and begging us to do something for them. Okay, let's do the third and last question then, Nikki, and then we'll pick up the fun next week, okay?
Okay. Well, you just answered Mr. Landry's question. He said we couldn't do it from the top up. How do we do it from the ground up? And you just answered that. And Anna Lee, again, talked about dual Israeli citizens controlling the media and whatnot. We have one other question you didn't touch from a Tarek. I would like to ask Jim, does he face any troubles in the States for speaking against Israel?
Unfortunately,
and that's from Switzerland.
Yeah, unfortunately, from Switzerland. Good. Well, we want to be talking to people all over the world. And by the way, you have to be an American citizen to be able to donate to my campaign. It's illegal for non-American citizens. I give you a few other options like an educational foundation, but to donate to the campaign, to help us get radio ads on in this next week when we still got time, you got to be an American citizen. The answer to that is that I'm not important enough and haven't made enough of an impact for them to mess with me. Now, I'll tell you who they do mess with. They mess with people that are in office. When you get too high up and you're a problem, they shoot you in the head like President Kennedy. And there's no question.
Or put you in prison like Jim Traficant.
Or put you in prison, total frame up like Jim Traficant. They didn't want Traficant and his booming voice standing up for the American people after 9/11. They had him tapped. It's now come out they had him tapped. In fact, if you want to have your spirits lifted, go to YouTube and punch in Jim Traficant-a tribute. I also have that in our audio video section at letfreedomring.com. It's 6 minutes. If you want to have your spirits lifted, you'll see why I spent most of the last 6 years of my life working with Jim Traficant to try to make him the national leader of this effort. I knew he was going to do it. I mean, it was his idea to do certain things and mine to do other things and other people's do other things, but we were going to have a national movement. You'll see why I was working with him, and your spirits will be lifted if you watch that 1 6-minute tape. But he was framed, and now we know they had him tapped. They had a secret camera in his office and never came up with any evidence, any physical evidence or any evidence of his voice of a crime at all. But they knew that people were calling him because he stood up against the IRS. He stood up for the John Demonic, who was being framed as Ivan the Terrible, which proved to be false. So people were calling him about 9/11. And as he says on another tape on YouTube, I didn't like what I was seeing. Well, they didn't want his voice out here, Nikki, all that time, and they also didn't want him to be out here in Congress when they did that $17 trillion theft in 2008 for the so-called bailout of the banks, which could have paid off every mortgage and every credit card in the United States. John Sharp, who was a Navy commander who put out 2 books very legally and within the Navy rules, Neocon to Neocon again, about the illegality and the brutality of the Iraq invasion, which we never should have done. He was forced out of his position. So if you have a official position, they mess with you. They just ignore me the best they can, Nikki. I'm going to have to run now because we're going to run out of time, but I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for calling in, and we'll pick up the fun with Facebook next week, okay?
Thank you so much. I wanted to tell people to check out our new article on the Kurds and the potential biblical prophecy they're trying to push the wars with now. Okay. And that'll be up on PalestineNews.com tomorrow night.
That's F-A-L, how do you spell it?
It's FALASTINEWS.com.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
PalestineNews.com, Foxtrot. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, now we got 2 minutes to cover 6 hours worth of material. I promised to talk about Hitler cooperating with the future founders of Israel. Go to Hitler's basic job when he was funded to power by the Rothschilds was to round up the everyday Jews in Europe, get them out of their homes, get them into the concentration camps. They didn't care how many everyday Jews died, and plenty did. But they were mainly trying to get Jews from Europe down to Israel. And the Nazism was one of the main reasons why the Rothschilds funded Nazism. And this is very controversial. I get a lot of hate mail from neo-Nazis and people that have lost their religion who have to have a hero, so they pick Hitler. I get a lot of negative mail from that crowd. For the Jewish people listening, who believe it or not, you might not believe it, but I'm not your enemy. I'm trying to resolve all this peacefully and constitutionally. And if there's another thing in the Middle East, they don't care how many people die in Israel. Let me tell you that. Half the people of Israel could die if a big war, and the top bankers couldn't care less. But read one book. If you think it's crazy that Hitler was helping to round up the Jewish people in order to get them down to Palestine, so the takeover of Israel of Palestine by Israel could happen 3 years after World War II in 1948. Read Perfidy by Ben Hecht. That's P-E-R-F-I-D-Y. He was a Jewish screenwriter who helped David O. Selznick on Gone with the Wind. Perfidy by Ben Hecht, 1961. I'll talk about that more next week. Well, we don't have time for anything. We got into the precinct strategy, and when you've changed the party leaders, you can bring the vote back. You can start endorsing Ron Paul-type, Liberty-type candidates. And we can fix the money. And I'm not going to have time to talk about the money here, apparently, because we're out of time. But if money were issued properly by a new organization under Congress, maybe called the National Monetary Office or something, we could put enough cash into the hands of the middle-class people so that people could get out of debt, not be living paycheck to paycheck. We would have to deal with the reality that computers, technology, and robots are taking more and more jobs, and robots, they say, are going to be flipping hamburgers at McDonald's within 10 years. So we got to take into the reality that we're so rich, we have so many machines and so many computers that we got to do something to even the purchasing power equal with the goods and services that are available, and we got to do it in a way that doesn't weaken human beings, but helps them strengthen and become the best people they could be. Okay, Jim Condit Jr. running for Congress against John Boehner. Vote for me. If you can't remember my name, then vote Constitution Party. Send them a message. This is everybody that lives in the 8th District up in Butler County and so forth. We'll talk more about all this stuff next time. I'm going to read a few quotes as we get done here. This is Pope Leo XIII, who was Pope from 18... I didn't talk about the eclipse of the Catholic Church this week. We'll do that next week. He was Pope from in the 1880s and 1890s up to 1903, 1878 to 1903. He said, Christians are born for combat, whereof the greater the vehemence, the more assuredly God aiding the triumph. Have confidence, I have overcome the world, quoting John 16:13. Pope Pius X, 1903 to 1904, said, all must remember that nobody has the right to remain indifferent when religion or the public welfare are in danger. Those who strive to destroy religion and civil society aim above all else at getting control as far as possible of the direction of public affairs and at having themselves chosen legislators. It is therefore necessary that Catholics should strive with all their might to avert that danger. Now, I want to ask people to pray. If you're any of the Christian denominations that aren't Catholic, then pray the healing prayer in the Old Testament that has to do with if God will heal our land. I'm sure a lot of you know that prayer by heart, but that's what you want to pray. Catholics say the Rosary. The Rosary is scriptural if you include the Book of Maccabees. And Our Lady of Fatima in 1917, the largest miracle ever seen in the history in recorded history. Our Lady of Fatima it's asked Catholics and everyone to pray the Rosary. So let's pray, because as one of my friends who's a priest says, if we work as hard as we can and we pray as hard as we can, then God will do the rest. I want to close by trying to quote a poem, I think it was by Longfellow, and he said, once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide in the choice of truth with falsehood for the good and evil side, and that choice goes down forever between the darkness and the light. Though right may be on the scaffold, though wrong may be on the throne, but that scaffold, those sacrifices sway the future, and behind the shadows, in the deep unknown, standeth God, keeping watch upon his own.